November 18th, 1942. Imagine a machine so feared, so technologically advanced, that its mere appearance over the horizon could shatter the morale of an entire nation's air force. This isn't science fiction. This is the true story of a moment above the blood-soaked island of Guadalcanal in late 1942, when the absolute aerial dominance of the Japanese Zero ended not in a desperate dogfight, but in a revelation of technological terror. On November 18, 1942, an unnamed Japanese Zero pilot tightened his grip on the control stick as he watched strange, twin-boomed American fighters climbing from Henderson Field. Twin-engined, twin-tailed, climbing like nothing we have seen, he would later report to a squadron commander at Rabaul. Those words, heavy with disbelief, revealed the first fatal crack in 3 years of Japanese air supremacy. The American P-38 Lightning, the only truly successful twin-engine daytime fighter of the entire war, was the product of a radical philosophy. Designed by Clarence Kelly Johnson and his team in 1937, it was built not for turning, but for speed, altitude, firepower, and survivability. Its twin Allison V1710 engines, each producing 1,150 horsepower with turbo-supercharging, granted it performance characteristics previously unseen in the Pacific, a top speed exceeding 400 miles per hour and an operational ceiling of 40,000 feet. The contrast with the Zero was stark. The Zero was a masterwork of lightness, achieving its range and agility by sacrificing armor protection and self-sealing fuel tanks. The Lightning was a flying fortress by comparison, a heavily armored, twin-engine platform built to take a hit and keep flying. On November 18, 1942, the 339th Fighter Squadron, flying the P-38s from Henderson Field, achieved first blood against Japanese fighters. Japanese pilots escorting their own bombers spotted the unusual silhouettes climbing from below. They were confused, mistaking the fighters for reconnaissance craft. By the time they realized their error, the P-38s had already gained a crucial 5,000-foot altitude advantage. The American pilots, many transitioning from P-40s, knew better than to dogfight the Zero. Instead, they patrolled above the Zero's effective operating ceiling, using their superior speed and altitude to dictate the terms of engagement. They would plunge from the sky to smash into the hapless Zeros with devastating effect, then zoom back to safety before the enemy could react. The mathematics of air combat were mercilessly against the Japanese. While the Zero's low-speed maneuverability was legendary, its high-speed performance was actually inferior to the Lightning's at altitude. Above 250 miles per hour, the Zero's controls became increasingly stiff, and above 300 miles per hour, the aircraft became extremely difficult to maneuver. The P-38, equipped with hydraulically boosted controls in later models, maintained its effectiveness even in near vertical dives, approaching 500 miles per hour. Adding to the terror was the P-38's revolutionary armament, 4 50-caliber machine guns and 1 20-millimeter cannon, all concentrated in the nose, delivering a tight, focused stream of fire that eliminated the complex gun convergence calculations required by wing-mounted weapons. The technological chasm extended deep into the engine bay. The Zero's engine lost power dramatically with altitude. At 20,000 feet, it was barely producing 750 horsepower. The P-38's turbo-superchargers, a technology completely revolutionary to the Japanese, maintained power output to much higher altitudes, giving the Lightning an overwhelming advantage in the vertical dimension of aerial combat. Furthermore, these superchargers effectively muffled the exhaust, meaning Japanese pilots often didn't hear the P-38 approaching until the stream of cannon shells was already upon them. By early 1943, the psychological impact was profound. The mythology of the Zero's invincibility was crumbling, and Japanese pilots spoke of constant tension, knowing a P-38 could strike from anywhere. Even the legendary Saburo Sakai was forced to admit the devastating truth. It was no longer possible for the Zero to successfully engage the P-38s, except under the most unusual conditions, which unhappily seldom presented themselves. This admission from Japan's most famous surviving ace carried a shattering weight. The tactical reality was that the P-38's extended range, thanks to drop tanks, allowed it to appear across the vast Pacific, escorting bombers deep into Japanese-controlled territory or conducting fighter sweeps far from Allied bases. Nothing demonstrated the P-38's superiority and reach more dramatically than Operation Vengeance on April 18, 1943. 16 P-38s flew a staggering 435-mile interception mission at wavetop height to ambush and shoot down Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, the mastermind of Pearl Harbor. The mission required extreme precision, arriving at the exact minute when Yamamoto's transport plane was descending for a landing, the moment it was most vulnerable. Zero escorts were overwhelmed, unable to respond effectively before the Lightnings vanished. The psychological impact of losing their most revered leader to American fighters operating at the very edge of their range was devastating to Japanese naval aviation. As 1943 progressed, American pilots perfected the boom and zoom attack, diving from altitude, firing, and then climbing away before the slower enemy could react. Japanese attempts to counter these tactics, using dive breaks, trying to lure the P-38 into low-altitude turning fights, or adopting new formations, failed consistently. The performance gap was simply too large to be bridged by courage alone. The P-38's twin-engine configuration provided an additional, critical psychological advantage: survivability. Even severely damaged Lightnings could often limp home on a single engine, a luxury denied to single-engine Zero pilots over vast stretches of ocean. The Lightning's dominance reflected a deeper truth about the industrial capacity of the United States. By the war's end, over 10,000 P-38s would be manufactured in 18 distinct models, each continuously improved based on combat experience. The P-38J model, for instance, addressed earlier weaknesses with improved superchargers and better heating. Japanese aircraft development, constrained by limited resources and institutional rigidity, struggled to produce meaningful incremental improvements to the aging Zero design. Captain Minoru Genda, the tactical genius behind the Pearl Harbor attack, privately lamented that Japan was not just facing a superior fighter, but a system of continuous improvement we cannot match. This technological gap was disastrously amplified by a divergence in pilot quality. By mid-1943, Japan was losing its experienced pilots faster than they could be replaced, forcing the shortening of training programs from 2 years to less than 6 months. New Japanese pilots arrived at combat units with less than 200 hours of total flight time. Conversely, American pilots were arriving with 400 to 600 hours of training, having practiced combat tactics, studied gun camera footage, and receiving specialized high-altitude and twin-engine training when transitioning to the P-38. The American pilots were skilled professionals. The Japanese were becoming little more than barely competent sacrifices. By late 1943, Japanese intelligence reports circulated among squadrons, advising pilots to avoid duels with the Lightning, noting its terrifying diving speed and ability to appear unexpectedly. This admission that Japanese pilots should actively run from American fighters was a complete reversal of the warrior ethic that had defined their naval aviation. The psychological fallout was devastating. The emergence of P-38 aces like Major Richard Bong, who achieved 40 victories, all in the Lightning, provided stark evidence of the fighter's overwhelming superiority. Over 1,800 Japanese aircraft would fall to the P-38 in the Pacific, a tally that represented not just aircraft destroyed, but experienced pilots Japan could never replace. Even the P-38's unique twin-boom silhouette became a psychological weapon, a symbol of American technological might. Japanese ground crews reported that the mere rumor of P-38s in the area would cause pilots to delay missions. Its supremacy had strategic implications, forcing the Imperial Japanese Navy to accelerate kamikaze tactics as conventional air combat became hopeless. The Zero, which had seemed invincible in 1941, was practically obsolete by 1943. Post-war interviews with surviving Japanese pilots confirmed the full extent of the psychological damage. Commander Masatake Okumiya admitted, "The P-38 broke our confidence completely. We had believed in our superiority, in our aircraft, in our training. The Lightning showed us we were wrong about everything." Another pilot confessed, "I was astonished to find an American aircraft that could outrun, outclimb, and outdive our Zero, which we thought was the most superior fighter plane in the world." The P-38 represented systematic application of science, engineering, and industrial management to warfare. Against this modern method, the Japanese samurai tradition, however noble, was helpless. The P-38 Lightning didn't just shoot down Japanese aircraft, it shattered an entire world view about honor, warfare, and national power. The shock experienced by Japanese pilots was the shock of discovering that everything they believed about air combat was tragically wrong. Saburo Sakai, who became a successful businessman after the war, often spoke of the enduring lesson. The Lightning taught us that we must never again fall behind technologically. It showed us that industrial power, not warrior spirit, determines victory in modern war. The P-38 was democracy's answer, delivered at 400 miles per hour from 30,000 feet. A technological supremacy that no amount of individual valor could overcome. In the skies over the Pacific, the age of the air warrior died, replaced by the crushing reality of industrial warfare.